Hello and welcome to this special Chess on Toast video where today we're going to look at the FIDE Candidates Tournament that's going on right now in London. This is day one, so this is our game of the day. My name's Nick Murphy, with me as always International Master Lorin D'Costa. So Lorin, which of the 4 games in the FIDE Candidates Tournament are we going to look at?
Hi there, right, we're going to look at the game between Vasily Ivanchuk and Alexander Grischuk. So for those who are watching it, all 4 games ended in draws, but this game I feel was the one that allowed me to explain the most and sort of benefit the viewer the most from all the games that we've seen, and it was a little bit more exciting than the others, I believe. So
were there a couple of tame, quite sort of quiet draws?
Well, the top players are all very good players. They don't really give much away, but I think this one from the outset looked quite exciting because apparently both players were playing quite quickly at the key moments. So either they had calculated everything, or basically could see that far ahead that they knew it was going to be a draw anyway.
But at this level, draw's not that peculiar, is it?
No, not at all. So even though the game didn't end decisively, we can say that the game still was worth looking at. Yeah.
Right, let's get stuck in.
So Vasily Ivanchuk, the maverick from Ukraine, one of the best players in the world. He's been former world number 2, I believe, and he's capable of producing brilliances. He nearly managed to do that here as well. And here he's facing the esteemed Russian Grandmaster Alexander Grischuk. So Grischuk, part-time poker player, part-time world top 10 chess player as well, I believe.
Wow.
So quite a mix of styles here. And Ivanchuk started with knight f3, which is called the reti. Well, it's only called the reti if white now follows up with pawn to c4. So some of you may not know this opening. But the idea is, of course, that these 2 moves control the centre squares. So we've always talked about the centre being very important, and here white plays knight f3 controlling the e5 square, and then follows up with c4 to attack the d5 square.
This is very different to some of the videos that we've done. It's still attacking the centre, but in a very different way
to
what we've seen.
With Chess on Toast, we're trying to look at sort of far more attacking, interesting, aggressive openings, whereas here white plays it slightly more what we call positionally. So you're going to see a bit of cat and mouse at the beginning. And Grischuk, obviously many moves he could play apart from, of course, pawn to e5, because that would lose a pawn. So he responded with d5. Now, white could, of course, play c4, and that would be the reti variation, as I just spoke about. But instead, Ivanchuk decided to play d4 and transpose it to d4 and move 1. So transposing means the moves end up being in the same as another variation. So
yeah, you could have played d4 first, then black could have played d5, and then you could have brought your knight to f3.
That's right. And black played knight f6, a sensible move. Just to comment quickly, do you think knight c6 is a good move?
Looks okay off the top of my head, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a variation called the triggering, but I think that it's played more by club players not really understanding why they've done it, and black should really try and leave this c-pawn advance. Yeah. Because if you notice that black now is struggling to get in e5 at any moment, because white has 2 pieces on it, doesn't it?
Try and get rid of that pawn on d4 and try and control the centre a bit better, and you can't do that with e5.
That's right. So black should always think about this c5 pawn break. So you actually see that the fight revolves around this square here, c5, and black eventually gets it in, but we're going to talk about that a bit later. So that's the key thing to think about in these d4, d5 variations like this. So Grischuk left the c-pawn free. He went knight f6 first, and white now played c4. This is called the...
I'm guessing this is a variation of... Is it the Catalan?
Well, hang on, you're rushing ahead a bit there, Nick.
Wow.
It's because you can see the moves and everyone else can't. But this is actually called the Queen's Gambit, because black, of course, could take this pawn here, and it's not defended. But the point is that white has now lured this d-pawn away from the centre, and thus allowed white to try and control this e4 square. Now, we can't go e4 at the moment, because black's knight would say, well, pretty much fancy that one. So instead white can play e3. It's not the only line, but the idea is to try and regain the pawn back from this. So whilst this is actually a variation, it's not meant to be that aggressive for black, and I'm pretty sure Grischuk wouldn't have liked that, because he's trying to win, isn't he?
Yeah.
So after c4 he could play the Slav, which is c6. Notice that black's actually going to play 2 moves to try and defend this pawn. Pawn to c6 is the Slav, which means that when white captures on d5, black will want to capture with the pawn.
Yeah.
In the game, he decided to play e6, which does exactly the same thing. If white captures on d5, black wants to capture with the pawn and control all of these centre squares. So whatever opening you do, as long as you cover those centre squares, as we know, you're going to be fine. And now White has got so many moves here. I couldn't possibly try to cover this in a 10-minute chapter.
No, we want to see the rest of the game.
So White now played what Nick just said was the Catalan with G3. Now, to the uninitiated eye, you might wonder why we're going to do that. Well, the point is to play bishop to G2 and rake this bishop all the way across the board. Now, when I teach juniors, they always fancy trying to win that rook in the corner. Against slightly better players, I don't think that's going to happen. But it basically puts Black on his toes, because now he's got to watch out for whether that bishop does have influence. So what you're going to see is whether this bishop on G2 is any better than the bishop on C8. Now I'll come on to that a bit later. But at the moment you see that the bishop would rake across the board, whereas the black bishop, does it have an alternative?
At the moment, the diagonal that it looks on looks a lot weaker, because it can only move one square, and it's not really pointing at any of White's pieces.
That's right. So at the moment, it's early days, but the black has to sort that one out. So
I can see you're not really aiming to get that black rook, but you're on a very powerful line. It's sort of, as you say, raking right across the board. So it's
that's right.
Sort of dominating that whole diagonal.
So one of the key moves here is black taking the pawn. Now notice that we're not going to play E3 and try and capture the pawn back straight away. So White would actually just gambit it, and that's for another day. It's very sharp, that variation there. So Grischuk plays slightly more solid bishop e7. Both sides get castled, sticking to the principles. Even the best players in the world, of course, get castled nice and early. And now Black has to decide what to do about that bishop on c8. And now you're going to see quite a nice little idea, which is worth remembering. Now Black plays d takes c4, not to win the pawn per se, but there's actually a little idea Black's going to do. And Black would like to put his bishop on the same diagonal, which would oppose White's bishop.
Sure.
So you might think, well, how are we going to do that? Well, you're going to see it in just a moment, because after queen c2, which attempts to regain the pawn on c4, Black doesn't bother trying to defend it. He can actually go b5, and it is a variation, but you might start to tremble about the fact that that bishop is now licking its lips over that one. Unfortunately, we can't do anything at the moment, because if we move our knight, Black has this really annoying knight d5 move, blocking the diagonal just. So Black is just about okay there. But instead, Grischuk decided, well, I'm just going to go a6. Again, another sort of perplexing move. Why is he not developing any pieces? But the point is that after White takes the pawn, regains the pawn on c4, now Black can play b5. And the point about this move now is that White has no time to move this knight anywhere.
I see, because you can't. You've got to move the queen to save it from that pawn.
That's right. So the queen has to move anywhere. I mean, it normally goes back to c2, but now Black just about gets the bishop in on b7, and there are no tricks. Obviously, Black would have to be careful of a discovered attack. Oh, excuse me. Black would have to be careful for a discovered attack anywhere down towards g2. But unfortunately, there isn't one.
So it turns out this Super Grandmaster does know what he's doing.
Yeah, it's a surprise, that, isn't it, Nick? I don't know. Maybe you missed something there. So White now played bishop g5. Again, not the only move. There's so many moves in this position. Bishop f4 being another one. But bishop g5 makes sense. And after knight d7, why do you think Black didn't really want to go here?
Well, it just blocks in the bishop that we were talking about, and well, yeah, I don't know.
Well, you've got to be careful. White could try to go knight e5.
Triple attacked even.
Yeah, White could try to go knight e5 and attack towards b7, but Black has the rejoinder knight takes d4, which counterattacks White's queen. So, although knight c6 doesn't lose on the spot, it's just not really where White wants to do. And remember we talked about that important c pawn?
We did.
Black must be able to go c5, his freeing move, or what we call a pawn break. A pawn break, by the way, doesn't mean when you pick up a pawn you smash it as hard as you can.
I didn't think it did.
That would break the pawn, but that's not the kind of thing that we advocate in any chess club. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put the knight instead on d7. And this knight helps control the c5 square, meaning Black can try and play c5. So bishop takes f6. Again, White tries to stop c5. Notice the knight now is not on d7, so Black can't go c5 at the moment because White has two pieces attacking it, and Black only has one piece defending it, which is the bishop. So Black played rook c8, trying to play c5, and White stopped it with knight b3. So you see what these grandmasters are doing. They're watching out for their opponent's moves, and they're trying to see if they can prevent their opponent's plans, which is quite high level, isn't it? So over the next few moves, you see Black trying to get c5 in. So bishop e4, quite an annoying move to the queen. Queen nudged up a square, and Black attacked it again. So The queen's being kicked around here, a bit like a tennis ball.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like black's actually gaining a bit of time because his minor pieces are chasing that white queen around the board.
That's right. And maybe white could have considered queen c1, but the queen, don't think he really wanted to put it there. But maybe queen c1 was the only way to try and keep some kind of advantage. Who am I to question these top guys? But anyway, queen d2, which is more natural. But now, finally, black managed to get into c5. Notice that if black does anything else, like queen d7, white now plays a really nice move, rook c1. And you see the pressure on that square. White will now follow up with knight c5. Black probably has to eliminate that knight. But then the white rook will swing in towards c5. And the rook on f1 will think, well, I like to double in right behind it. And the black c pawn on c7 will look a bit of a shameful figure.
White would be dominating that c file, and black's plans would have all failed.
That's right. And also, on another point, after queen d7, can you see how white can win this bishop on e4? I just missed that, actually.
Oh, you're going to say something. Oh, you could attack the queen with the knight by moving it to f5.
So whilst I was talking about all that strategy, there's actually a nice way for white to do a discovered attack on the queen and the bishop. So, got to keep your wits about you. But we are rushing this through. So Grischuk knows his stuff, plays c5, and white kind of has to take it, otherwise black c pawn looks quite strong if it goes to c4. So takes, and everything came off, and white challenged the rook. So the position is actually fairly equal, and the pieces came off.
You can see though that tension's suddenly been released right in the centre.
Yeah, it was really important that black got in c5. That was that white tried desperately hard to stop black playing that, and black managed to get it in. So queen a8, which is not the most obvious move, but it's a very nice square because the queen helps what black challenge the c file with rook c8, and it helps the bishop attack all the way down this long diagonal. So in fact, it's black giving white a taste of his own medicine.
Yeah.
Because remember we talked about that bishop on g2 trying to hit black on the long diagonal.
Actually, now black's hitting that.
Yeah. So and white decided to play a slightly strange move, bishop to f1. Well, yeah, maybe he should have just gone knight e1 and exchanged off the bishops like this, and probably the game is just completely equal. But Ivanchuk, being Ivanchuk as white, the maverick that he is, decided, well, maybe I should still try and play for a win. Which made things rather weird, because after black took the knight, notice that black only took the knight when white must recapture with the pawn and not the bishop.
Right.
So now black has a lovely knight on here, and white has these potentially bad double pawns, but I think they're generally okay. So the position is still rather equal.
I mean, it looks to my unmasterly eye as though black is slightly better purely because of those double pawns. But as you say, there's nothing obvious that black can do to take advantage.
No, and when white goes f4, he does the correct strategy, which is putting the pawns on the opposite colour of your bishop. And this is something that Philidor said back in the mid-1700s, so we're going back a long time ago.
Okay.
And he was the first one to say that. So I think white's basically okay here. The position is still equal, and actually the rooks came off. Queen d8. Black has to be a bit careful that he doesn't allow queen c6 here, which looks like quite a good move to attack the pawn. But why does it actually lose? This is what Grischuk played queen d8 for.
I can't see why it loses.
Well, that bishop looks a bit loose now. The queen's on the d file. So,
okay.
What can black do about that?
You could maybe move the knight somewhere to attack the white queen. Something. Oh, I don't know. Maybe move it. Maybe move it to b4.
Yeah, good. If you go knight e7, then I can save the queen and defend the bishop. But knight b4 was, clearly his attempt to try and trick Ivanchuk. But yeah, these guys aren't going to fall for that. So queen d8 was quite a crafty little move there, tempting white to swing his queen in, but actually loses to a fork, doesn't it? So
it does.
So a3. Now you've just seen exactly why that was played, to stop knight b4. And now g6, bishop e4. Well, the game is roughly equal. Queen f6. Both sides keep the position fairly solid. Knight b6 is quite a good move because he's threatening to come into c4, which would do a double attack. So what you see about these players is they're very tactically adept, aren't they? They never miss a trick. And it looks as though black can win a pawn with queen check and queen takes a3. But of course, as we just said, they're not going to miss a trick. What could white do now?
White
to
could
turn
fork
the
the king and the knight.
How are we going to do that?
You'd move the queen to d4.
Good. So, of course, Ivanchuk didn't miss anything. And so b3 was quite a nice little move.
You can see it in many ways why they draw so many of their games, because they're both so aware of the tactics. They're not falling for traps that club level players like myself fall for all the time.
Yeah, even 1900 level players might have fallen for this queen a1 trick. So yeah, it's quite a difficult one. So black went back, tempting white to try and swap everything off, and now they both decided to swap everything off. So here the game really kind of just petered out into a draw. It's a completely level queen ending. Queen endings are the hardest to win, even if you're actually 1 or 2 pawns ahead, because the opponent's queen is very good at giving check to your king,
right,
and trying to get a perpetual check or a draw in that respect. So queen endings are, and especially with the queen ending where we've got 5 pawns each, it's completely level. So the game basically ended in a draw. But I think this game was worth showing above the other 3 games, mainly because of the strategy of that pawn break, pawn to c5. So remember, if your opponent plays d4 and move 1 and you reply with d5, remember that if you're black, you need to think about that c5 pawn break, and a pawn break is very important in any opening to free your pieces and open up the position.
That's great, thank you very much, Lorin. You can see that even draws in chess can be interesting too. That was round 1 of the London Candidates Tournament 2013. We'll see you tomorrow for Chess on Toast, doing Game of the Day from round 2.